All the Young Dudes, Sirius's Perspective by Rollercosterwords. Chapter 44, 3rd Year, Hogsmeade. Saturday the 15th of September, 1973. Pack your cloak, James. Why? Well, you never know, do you? Fine, but I doubt we'll want it. Oh, don't forget you still owe me a galleon for that bet we had. I haven't, James assured him. Just relax for a minute, will you? Never, Sirius grinned, veins fizzing with adrenaline. You do realise that this is the most excitement I've had in months. I wasn't even allowed out to Diagon Alley this summer. You had more excitement than I did, James frowned. At least you had all that betrothal drama. My family's so boring. Oh, shut up, Potter. Your family's amazing and you know it. I definitely had the worst summer. I had a great time in France, Peter chirped, but Sirius ignored him, as did the other two boys. What about you, Moony? James asked, trying to include Remus. They all picked their way down the stairs to the common room, joining the rest of the eager third years. Their voices blended into the low buzz of chatter. Everyone was excited for their first trip into the village. What about me? Remus asked, a little too innocently. Well, how was your summer? You haven't told us anything. Nothing to tell, Remus shrugged. More boring than yours. No magic, just read. Sirius didn't believe it for a second. He was still trying to figure out his friend's secret, and thought that Remus was being entirely too nonchalant. But James didn't have the same instinct for deception. He responded cheerily, Well, you're all coming to mine for Christmas, same as last year, yeah? They began to file out of the common room, following the pull of the crowd towards the front entrance. Moon's on the 10th of December, so we don't even have to worry about that. Remus's mouth fell open. Oh, do you know when it is? He asked, as if they didn't all take astronomy together. I told you! We were bored over the summer, Sirius nudged him. We looked it up for the next few years. But why? Remus asked, flabbergasted. He looked as if he didn't quite believe them. It's like Quidditch, James said, one of his most commonly used phrases, along with Oi Evans. You just know to know your team's weaknesses in order to work on their strengths. Yeah, if you say so, Remus mumbled, frowning. Sirius wondered if James's word choice had offended him. Weakness. Remus hated sharing any vulnerability. He was too proud. But just because he was too hard-headed to ask for help didn't mean his friends were just going to stop caring. After all, what else were friends for? Oh, look who it is! Sirius poked James with his elbow, gesturing to the archway entrance. A hunched-over figure hovered, like an overgrown bat. Lily pushed past the marauders and went to meet him, Snape. Why are they even friends? James grumbled, running a hand through his hair. It frustrated him to no end that Lily wouldn't give him the time of day, but would willingly choose to spend entire afternoons with Severus. Sirius thought it was just more evidence that the girl was crazy. They grew up in the same town, Remus answered, watching the couple as they walked ahead of them. The two were engaged in an animated discussion, Lily's red hair flashing even more brilliantly next to Snape's dark head. How do you know? James asked suspiciously, sounding a bit affronted. She told me. You fancy her, then? James asked, as if it was the next logical conclusion. Sirius frowned. Remus was too smart to fancy Lily Evans, right? Their friend rolled his eyes. No, he said firmly. We just chat, and if you fancy her, then you might want to try it. Sirius felt an immediate wash of relief, paired with a strangely triumphant happiness. He knew Remus didn't care about Lily. Well, not as much as he cared about the marauders, anyway. Sirius attributed most of his relief to the fact that he likely would have gone insane if both his best mates started making fools of themselves because of the same annoying girl. It was all well and good to talk about how other people fancied, like Matthew Studd, a Ravenclaw 4th year who had just started dating Avini Churchry, a Gryffindor 3rd year. But Sirius would prefer his own friends to remain above such trivial pursuits. As marauders, they had more important things to worry about. Unfortunately, James was still hung up on Lily. She likes you, though, he said. You did all your revision together last term. Only because you lot can be asked, Remus shot back defensively. They were approaching the town now, and a cluster of pretty stone buildings sat just below them. It's not like we were alone. Mary and Marlene were there too. We all need to start taking notes from Moony, Sirius teased, trying to put an end to the discussion by turning it into a joke. Birds follow him everywhere. How'd you do it, Lupin? Those big brown eyes of yours. This appeared to do the trick. James and Peter snickered, and James dropped the interrogation about Lily. But Remus seemed annoyed, walking slightly ahead of them with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His cheeks were pink, and not just from the cold. Was he blushing? Sirius felt a twist of nerves in his gut. It wasn't possible that Remus actually fancied one of the girls, right? James and Lily were one thing. It made sense for James, whose stubbornness and obsessive devotion were not so different from his attitude towards Quidditch. James Potter was the sort of person who would never rescind his undying loyalty once he'd bestowed it, regardless of whether the person he'd bestowed it upon even wanted it there in the first place. Fancying Lily was just one more addition to this aspect of his personality. Remus was different. He was a mystery, a series of locked doors. If you made it past the first layer of secrets, a new one appeared. Only a few select people, special people, could make it past those defences, and Sirius felt very certain that none of the girls had what it took. Luckily, they were just arriving in Hogsmeade, prompting a change in conversation topic. "Honeydukes?" James asked. "Honeydukes," the others responded in unison. Of course, all four boys were frequent perusers of the candy shop's goods, but their excursions were typically relegated to the storage room in the basement, and the top floor was its own world of wonders. Explosions of colour assaulted their eyes at every turn, great crystalline jars filled with rainbow taffy, brightly wrapped chocolate bars, and delicate confections made of spun sugar that seemed to glitter in the sunlight. The shop was packed with Hogwarts students, so that the marauders had to shove and squeeze through the crowds of people, reaching for handfuls of sugar mice and chocolate frogs. It wasn't until they had gathered enough candy to last them till Christmas that they pushed it over to the till, spreading out armfuls of sweets in front of an elderly wizard who looked a bit overwhelmed by all the jabbering students. Sweets secured, the marauders' next stop was Zonko's, the infamous joke shop. It was just as busy as Honeydukes, though far noisier. Sirius could hardly hear himself think. The sound of students testing prank materials, pops, wizards, bangs and zings, peppered the air around them, along with delighted shrieks of laughter. James and Sirius got straight down to business, examining each corner of the shop with a cutting efficiency, as they decided which products would be most useful for their upcoming pranks. After 30 minutes, they left with arms weighed down by bags full of dung bombs, trick wands, exploding inkwells, hiccup sweets, and bars of frog spawn soap. Their next destination was the Shrieking Shack, a fairly new attraction, as rumours that the abandoned house was haunted had only begun to spread a few years back. Still, it had quickly become a tradition for Hogwarts students to visit, daring their friends to knock on the door or peer through a window. Not wanting to miss out on anything, the marauders began the uphill trek, bags in tow. "So, what is this place again?" Remus asked, breathing hard. He was lagging behind the others, walking slowly. "Haunted house," James replied, hanging back with Remus. "Most haunted place in Britain, Dad says." "It's not haunted," Sirius called back to them. "You Potters are just superstitious." "I heard that the ghosts were really nasty," Peter said anxiously. He was breathing just as hard as Remus. Clearly, the marauders needed to get into better shape. "Worse than Peeves." "Are they poltergeists, then?" Remus asked. Ever the scholar, he sounded as though he was ready to whip out a quill and start taking notes. "Think so," James said. "The locals say that they hear screaming coming from this house some nights." Sirius shook his head. He thought all the rumours were absolute rubbish. Hauntings didn't just happen out of nowhere. Anyone who had read anything about ghosts knew that. "Only for a few years, though," he pointed out. "Poltergeists don't just move in at a moment's notice. There would have been decades and decades of disturbance and negative energy building up to, oh my god." Lupin's voice wasn't loud, but the words were strung like a puppet, as if they'd been yanked from him. When Sirius looked back, he had stopped dead, staring at the house. "What's up, Moony? Want me to take your bags?" James asked, concerned. Remus shook his head mutely. His eyes were wide and white, pupils dark and constricted in the centre. His face had gone bloodless and pale. He looked as though he might be sick. Sirius shifted uncomfortably. "Bloody hell! If it is haunted, I think Moony's been possessed," he joked, trying not to show how much Remus was really freaking him out. "Oi, Lupin! You're being weird. Stop it." Remus swallowed, as if he was trying to remember how to speak. He closed his eyes and sucked in a mouthful of air. "That's the house. Where they put me." It took a split second for the words to click. When they did, a chill ran up Sirius's spine. He turned to look back at the house, with its greying wood and boarded-up windows. This was where they kept him. It was a rotting thing, a crypt. Sirius shuddered. James had a hand on Remus's shoulder, steadying him as he said, "Okay, come on, it's time to go." Sirius didn't try to argue, not wanting to spend another second staring at that house. He kept imagining Remus inside, alone and trapped during his transformations. The thought of his scars on his friend's skin, the shrieking shack. The rumours hadn't started until after Remus had arrived at Hogwarts. James guided their group back to the Three Broomsticks, a cosy little pub on the main street. They found a table in a quiet corner, settling into the cushioned chairs without speaking. James went to the bar, and Sirius and Peter situated themselves on either side of Remus, who still looked pale. "So, on the full moon, that's where you go?" Peter asked. Sirius shot him a glare, which he didn't seem to see. How bloody stupid could he be, wanting to talk about this when Remus looked as if he was about to throw up all over the table? Lupin nodded silently, not meeting Peter's eye. "It's not haunted, then?" he pressed. Sirius glared even more furiously. "Nope, just me." "So, wait, the shrieking is me? But why?" "Oh, shut up, Pettigrew," Sirius snarled, unable to take any more of Peter's blubbering questions. Remus's head snapped up, and their eyes met. James returned before anyone else could speak, settling down 4 amber bottles before taking his seat. "Butterbeer," he said, a bit too cheerfully. He nudged one of the bottles towards Remus. "Try it, Moony, you'll love it." Sirius raised his glass gamily to his lips. He was obviously still shaken, but he swallowed a large gulp of the syrupy drink and smiled at James afterwards, trying to shake off his friend's concern. Unlike Peter, James was tactful enough to see that Remus didn't want to talk about the Shrieking Shack. Instead, he struck up conversation about their new practical joke arsenal, a topic that Sirius latched onto with great enthusiasm. Remus remained quiet, but seemed to relax the longer they were sat, sipping his butterbeer and smiling at the plots for how best to utilize their new supplies. Peter had an unusually brilliant idea of casting a remote time spell on the dung bombs so that they could be triggered at any time from anywhere in the castle. "Excellent diversionary tactic," James crowned, waving his empty butterbeer bottle about for emphasis. "Think of what we could get away with if Filch was chasing dung bombs on the opposite side of the bloody building. Give us more time to work on the map a bit, too," Remus threw in. "You're not seeing the bigger picture," Sirius tutted, folding his arms imperiously. "We could set them all to go off at the same time. Imagine! We've probably got enough to hide in every classroom. Total chaos." He could picture it clearly in his mind's eye. Students screaming, professors shouting as they tried to keep everyone calm, classes cancelled for the rest of the day. His friends nodded, just as enthusiastic about the idea. "Oh, let's not sit here, Lily. Doesn't look very clean." An oily hiss slithered over the low chatter of the bar, interrupting them. "They allow in all sorts. Clearly." Sirius straightened, his eyes landing on Severus Snape. The greasy boy was hunched over a nearby table, beady eyes glaring at them. "Oh, don't be silly, Sev, it's fine," Lily said, shaking her head as she pulled out a seat. "All right, Evans," James waved, over-enthusiastic, and Sirius groaned internally. "Oh, leave us alone, will you, Potter?" Lily tossed her hair. "Hiya, Remus." "Aye," he waved too, grinning. Sirius glowered, looking back and forth between his friends, as the red-headed girl perched a few feet away from them. "Ugh," he said loudly, holding his nose and turning his glare back to Snape. "What is that smell? Potter, did you trail something in on your shoe?" James snickered, catching on immediately. "Smells more like a dung bomb's gone off." "Disgusting," Sirius drawled. "Maybe we should open a window." Snape was livid, lips pulled back into an angry grimace. Lily put a hand on his arm, saying primly, "Just ignore them, Sev, they're idiots." Sirius snorted. She was the one spending time with Severus Slimy Git Snape, so he really didn't think Lily Evans had much of a right to talk about who wasn't or was an idiot. He was about to turn back to his butterbeer when the Slytherin boy opened his mouth again. "How's the family, Black?" he asked, voice saccharine, needling. Sirius stiffened without meaning to. Snape continued. "Regulus was telling everyone you had quite an exciting summer. So exciting, in fact, that you're no longer welcome back, What? What was that supposed to mean? Reg wouldn't. He'd never. You don't know what you're talking about, Snivelus," trying not to flush with shame as he imagined his little brother in the Slytherin common room laughing about him. Lost cause, disappointment, failure. "Don't I?" Snape wore a manic grin. "Had any post from Mummy this year, Black? Heard anything from any of your relatives?" He hadn't. But that was just... It didn't mean anything. They ignored him all the time. Well, not all the time. This summer definitely was unusual. It couldn't mean... It didn't... Just ignore him, mate, James said quietly. He's a prick. Ignore him. But he couldn't, because Severus was still speaking. I'm right, then, he said, smile pointed and sharp. No wonder you follow Potter around like a lovesick girl, when your own family didn't want anything to do with you. When you've been disowned like that, I suppose all that's left to do is to associate with the dregs of society. The words rang in his head. Your own family don't want anything to do with you. Following Potter around like a lovesick girl. Sirius stood up before he realized what he was doing, knocking his chair back. His wand was clutched in his fist. When had he pulled it out? Remus stood next to him, fists clenched, eyes fixed on Snape's sallow face. Sirius, don't. James reached for his own wand. Panicked. They weren't allowed to perform magic in Hogsmeade. Come on, Severus, let's just go. Lily was standing too, tugging on her friend's sleeve anxiously. No, Sirius said. He needed to get out of here. His blood was snapping its jaws in his veins, boiling. He needed to leave. He couldn't let them see. We are leaving. Come on, lads. I can't stand this stench much longer. His friends followed him without protest, abandoning their half-drunk butterbeers. That was really mature, James said, scratching his head as they stepped outside. His voice was wary. The setting sun reflected on his glasses. Sirius snorted, swallowing the lump in his throat as they began to walk back towards Hogwarts. It's not over, he said once he trusted himself to speak again. I'll show him. I'll bloody destroy him. The Marauders were at war. Chapter 45. Third year, noble and most ancient.
I will scream, I will break my arm, I will do me harm.
Saturday the 15th of September, 1973. Sirius? James's voice was firm, insistent. Sirius? He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing that just for once in his life James Potter would just give up. Oh, for the love of... Sirius Orion Black III, I know you're in there. His friend continued pounding on the door, hammering strikes that made Sirius flinch and grit his teeth. Eventually, when James showed no signs of stopping, he called through the wood, Oh, piss off, Potter! The knocking stopped. Sirius released a shaky breath, scrubbing the heels of his hands against his eyes. He'd locked himself in the bathroom when the other Marauders went down for dinner, almost 2 hours ago. Alone and surrounded by cold tile, Sirius had grappled with the snarling tangle of rage in his chest. He wanted to kill Severus Snape. He wanted to hurt him, to humiliate him so badly that he'd never be able to show his face at Hogwarts again. He wanted to make him feel small and weak and alone. He wanted to make him feel worthless. Regulus, too. He was furious, replaying Snape's words as he paced. Regulus was telling everyone you had quite an exciting summer. The image of his little brother swam before his eyes, mouth twisted into a nasty smile, surrounded by laughing Slytherins. His magic spiraled, uncorked by anger, fizzing with his wordless need to hurt, to push the pain outwards in a tangible way. Above him the light bulb shattered, and he was alone in the dark. Sirius didn't know how long he'd spent, pacing the tile like a caged animal, waiting for the rage to consume him, or transform him, or burn him out. The anger only sharpened his awareness of his own impotence. He felt the unrelenting need to do something, while simultaneously understanding that there was nothing in the moment that could be done. Had they really kicked him out? He wasn't sure where the tears came from, only that they made him angry. It just didn't make any sense. Surely they would have said something if they were disinheriting him. Surely they wouldn't have forced him to go on the train as a family, hissing to keep up appearances. Surely Reg would have warned him, right? He hunched down on the edge of the tub, shoving his face into his hands, digging his fingers into his scalp. Why did he even care? Wasn't this what he'd always wanted? For his family to just leave him alone? He should be thrilled, happy, delirious with joy. He could do whatever he wanted. He should be utterly relieved, no longer forced to bear the burden of his father's expectations or his mother's disappointments, of his brother's accusatory stares. So why did he feel so utterly, nauseatingly empty? Remus and James were talking outside. He could hear their voices, muffled through the wood of the bathroom door. The words blurred together, a low hum that his brain couldn't pick apart. He knew they were talking about him, worrying about him, but he couldn't bring himself to care. He just wanted everyone to go away, to leave him alone in the dark. It was quiet in the bathroom. Nice. Maybe if he sat there long enough, the feelings would all leak out of him, dripping down the side of the tub and disappearing into the drain. There was another knock on the bathroom door. Sirius? It was James again. Please, just come out and talk to us." "Get lost, Potter! Leave me alone!" He couldn't bear to see James right now, to look into those warm, concerned eyes and think of Euphemia, and how she'd hugged him, and how she'd felt like a real mother. James would never understand, not really, and Sirius knew that in his current state the jealousy would only swallow him whole. There was another hard knock on the wood. Sirius felt his fingers curling into fists. "I said, piss off!" "Sirius, it's me." Remus's voice stung, antiseptic on an open wound. Nothing like the soft, pleading pity in James's tone. "Look, if you're going to mope about like a big Jessie, then at least let us in so we can start planning our revenge." Sirius stared at the floor, voice caught in his throat. When he didn't respond, Remus tutted. "Fine, sulk, but you're being a selfish git. You know you're not the only one whose family hates you." Sirius blinked. Outside the door, James was exclaiming in dismay, but he ignored it. Remus's words were burrowing into him, doing funny things to his chest. "You're not the only one whose family hates you." He shuffled over to the door and unlocked it, peering out. James and Remus both took a step back, looking surprised. "Finally," James said with exasperated relief. "Look, come out and—" "Moony can come in," Sirius interrupted, cracking the door just enough for Remus to squeeze inside before slamming it and locking it once more. The dark settled back, a heavy blanket around his shoulders. "Lumos," Remus muttered. He held the point tip of his wand up, bleeding pale light into the room. His eyes landed on Sirius's face for a moment before darting away, studying the smashed light fixtures. He clicked his tongue, smiling dryly. "You and your temper, eh?" He flicked his wand and murmured, "Reparo, reparo." The glass knit back together at once, wires inside burning with heat and light. Remus extinguished the glow at the tip of his wand, tucking it back into his robes. "I didn't do it on purpose," Sirius sniffed, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. His face felt hot, skin tight and irritated with tear stains. "I still smash stuff, sometimes, when I'm angry. My magic just gets all out of whack." "Oh, right," Remus nodded. Sirius thought he probably understood better than anyone, considering how his magic tended to go all wonky closer to a full moon. "So, revenge." He settled onto the toilet lid, watching his friend expectantly. Moony always had the best ideas. "Revenge," Remus agreed. "What do you want to do to him?" "Not just him," Sirius said quickly. "All of them. Every single Slytherin in the school." He pictured his brother again, whispering to all his slimy little friends as they laughed behind his back. He wanted to make them pay. Remus nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, we'll get 'em all, Black. Now, come on, let's go in." "I'm not coming out yet," Sirius interrupted, crossing his arms. If Remus had just come in here to coax him out, then he was going to be very disappointed. The other boy huffed with a resigned sigh and took a seat on the floor, leaning against the door. "All right, fine. Do you want to talk about it? Because James is probably the best person to—" "Did you mean what you said?" Sirius butted in, not letting Remus finish. He didn't want to talk with James right now. He wanted to talk to Moony. "Do you think my family hates me?" "Oh God, I don't know, do I? I'm not exactly the authority on families." Remus rubbed the back of his head, looking a bit guilty. "To be honest, I was just trying to get you to open the door." Sirius studied him, trying to decipher the expression on his face. "You said your family hates you." "Well, I suppose they must have." Remus spoke with no more emotion than if they were discussing the weather. Otherwise they wouldn't have... well, I wouldn't have been sent to St. Edmund's, would I? "That doesn't mean they hate you." "No," Remus said slowly, after a considering moment. "But I don't think they could have liked me very much, all the same." He was so calm when he said it. Sirius didn't understand. No matter how hard he tried to stop caring, there was still a small, childish part of him that desperately wanted his parents to just... "You're not... I mean, it doesn't bother you?" Remus shrugged. "Well, sometimes, obviously. But, you know, no one's entitled to an happy life." He was so bleak. Blimey, Lupin. You're a right downer, you know that. And yet, something about the way he'd said it, firm, settled, as if there was nothing to do but accept it and move on. It was soothing. "You let me in." Remus kicked him lightly in the shin with the toe of his trainer. "If you want cheering up, then I'll go get Potter." "Nah," Sirius shrugged, attempting a smile. "You're okay." Remus chuckled and shook his head. "James didn't want me to come in. Said we'd just bicker." "What?" Sirius gasped, affronted. "We do not bicker." "Well, that's what I said." They were quiet for a moment, smiling at each other, and then Sirius looked away, saying quickly, My family, he faltered, but pressed on, overcome with the need to exorcise the words from his mind. I don't think they hate me. I think they want to like me, really. But I keep letting everyone down. It's funny most of the time, but, well, it isn't today. He felt a little lighter, with the words spilled out between them. Even if they didn't do any good, at least they were no longer bouncing around in his head. Remus didn't say anything. He just nodded once, slowly. His gaze was a comfort, not quite understanding, but something close. Eyes framed by lashes, pupils so dark and liquid that Sirius could drown in them. Friday the 5th of October, 1973. I've got it! I've really got it this time! That's great, Pete. Remus flicked the page of his arithmancy textbook. We should dye his robes pink. You'd just dye them back to black. It's too simple. Where would we even get his robes from, anyway? Sirius ignored his friends, trying to focus on the Quidditch pitch. They were sitting in the stands watching the Gryffindor practice. Marlene had just let an extremely tentacious bludger get past, and it slammed into the keeper at full throttle. Ouch! Bloody hell, there's something wrong with that bludger! Sirius shouted, leaping to his feet. Come on, McKinnon! Come on, McKinnon, move your bloody arse! Do you mind keeping her arse out of it? Mary snapped from where she was sitting a few rows away from them. She frowned back at him, and he shot her a cheeky smile. Jealous, MacDonald? She rolled her eyes, lips quirking up. Sirius wiggled his eyebrows at her. Dye his hair pink, then, Peter said, still trying to get Remus's attention. He grabbed the other boy's arm, shaking as he insisted. I've learnt the colour-changing spell now. I can do it. So can he, Remus grumbled, jerking his arm away from Peter's grip and turning stubbornly back to his book. You know, Moony, you could show a bit more interest, Sirius said dryly, retaking his seat. In Quidditch, or taking down your arch-nemesis? Both? Either? I'm here, aren't I? Remus's eyes remained glued on his page, and Sirius exchanged a long, suffering look with Peter. Who's your arch-nemesis? Mary asked, moving over to sit down next to Sirius. If I told you, I'd have to kill you, he said deadpan. Mary rolled her eyes again. Is it Snape? All three boys looked at her in surprise. She laughed, a delighted, fluttery sound, and said, Come on, you lot. It's not exactly a secret. You've all had it in for each other since first year. Plus, Lily's one of my best friends. Don't talk about Evans, Sirius groaned. I hear enough as it is. I think she's an idiot, going around with that creep, Mary said decisively, with a little shudder. You know you made Marlene cry the other day. Called her dad something really nasty. Makes no sense either, because Lily says that he's a half-blood. Severus, anyway. Someone needs to teach him a lesson. Ha! Sirius laughed sharply, delighted by the news. All this time, Snape had been prancing about with his nose in the air, talking about purity and blood traitors, when his blood wasn't even pure. He's half-blood! Brilliant! Yeah, Mary said, voice frosty. So's Remus, and I'm Muggle-born. So what? Sirius felt an immediate rush of shame. He hadn't meant it like that. It was just satisfying to know that Snivellus was such a hypocrite, that's all. He looked away from Mary, nervously, fixing his gaze back on the Quidditch pitch as he muttered, Nothing. I'm not like that. Good. Mary smoothed her skirt down with a flick of her wrist. I get enough of that shit from the Slytherins. Sirius frowned, abashed, and he watched Marlene bat away a bludger. Had Snape really made her cry? He knew Snivellus was a tosser, but there was something dishonourable about picking on a girl. It wasn't frivolous. Sirius didn't fully understand why, not in the way that he could put into words. But you were supposed to treat girls differently than boys. It was why he preferred not to be friends with them. He always felt like he was going to say or do something wrong. Mary's knee knocked into his as she shifted. She didn't pull away. He continued to watch the practice, turning her words over in his mind. Sirius had never really considered what it was like to be anything other than a pureblood at Hogwarts. He'd always assumed that everyone was pretty much treated the same. Of course, he knew the insults people throw around. He'd learnt most of them from his own mother. But they didn't actually care about that stuff here, right? At least, nobody other than the Slytherins. It wasn't as if blood mattered at Hogwarts. In the castle, everyone was equal. On the pitch, the chasers began practicing a complicated formation that involved a series of very sharp dives, pulling Sirius's focus back to the Quidditch. He watched, holding his breath as James plunged towards the ground at breakneck speed. Oh. Next to him, Remus put his book down. Sirius thought the dangerous flying has drawn his attention too, until he grabbed Sirius's arm and shook it, crying out, "Oh my God!" "What?" Sirius tore his gaze away from the Quidditch, frowning. He'd skipped tryouts for the team this year, even though James had urged him to give it another go. He couldn't bear the thought of letting everyone know how badly he wanted it, only to have it a repeat of last year. Better to avoid any embarrassment altogether. Of course, that meant he had to get his fill of Quidditch from watching practices, and he didn't appreciate Remus interrupting. "We can change the words," Remus said excitedly. "We can change what he says." "What are you talking about?" Sirius stared at him in bewilderment. "Snivelus? Yeah, there are spells you can do to stop someone speaking, right?" Sirius flushed. They both knew very well that there were spells that could do that. "Yeah? Okay, so how much more difficult can it be to, twist their words? We could set a trigger word, or a few, mudblood, or blood traitor, or half-breed, or dung liquor, or whatever, and instead we make him say something really nice, or something really stupid, whatever we like." Sirius blinked. "Moony, where did you hear all of those?" James scored a goal, and Peter leapt up, clapping frantically. Their friend showed off, looping around a few times on his broom in the air. Sirius grinned at him, wishing desperately that he could also be on the pitch. "So?" Remus grabbed his shoulder, anxious for his attention. "What do you think?" "I love it," Sirius said. It was brilliant. Moony's ideas always were. "We should make him say something really ridiculous, like, I don't know, snuggle bunnies or something." "We'll go to the library after this, yeah?" "Can I come?" Mary asked. Sirius had forgotten that she was still sitting next to him. He shrugged. "If you want to, I suppose. It's serious marauder business, though." She giggled, even though Sirius wasn't trying to be funny. That was just Mary, though. She was always smiling and laughing about something. 20 minutes later, the training session had ended. The marauders made their way into the castle, Mary and Marlene trailing behind as Sirius and Remus explained their plan to an eagerly listening James. "You're supposed to be off the pitch by 5 o'clock, someone grunted, stepping in front of them. Sirius looked up, and an icy weight settled in his chest. The Slytherin Quidditch team was walking directly towards them, green robes flapping, brooms in hand. "We're leaving now, Bloodstrode, bloody hell," James replied, not even attempting to hide his irritation. The Slytherin captain scowled and pushed past him, deliberately knocking into James's shoulder as he did so. With his squashed features and bulky frame, he reminded Sirius of the illustrations he'd seen of mountain trolls. "Oi!" He pulled his wand out, itching for a fight, but James held him back. "What is it with you, Black?" Bloodstrode sneered. "If that's even still your name." His teammates' laughter corkscrewed in the air, nauseating and sharp as the Slytherins fled past. And Reg was there. Reg was laughing with them. The rage came over him like a wave. Sirius was barely aware that he'd started moving until he felt his friend's hand grabbing to stop him. It took both James and Remus to hold him back. The other Slytherins were snickering and whispering, but his eyes stayed locked on Regulus. Traitor. The smirk calcified on his brother's face. There was a flash of fear in his eyes. Sirius had half thought that Snivelus was exaggerating, trying to turn him against his brother, but this confirmed it. Regulus had chosen a side. "Remember the plan," Remus whispered. Sirius reined in his anger, nodding. "Promise me we'll get all of them," he growled, watching his little brother walk away.